Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So it's time for an album review this Thursday, and this time I'm reviewing an album from an unsigned band called Marsh of Swans, and this is their release Heartwood, which came out on the 10th of November, and the album is 6 tracks and 44 minutes in length. So this is a two-man atmospheric black metal project from Kansas in the US, and I'm going to directly quote this statement about the album from the Bandcamp webpage. So the album projects a journey of the mind whose destination is abstracted in reflections of transience and in reverence for our homelands. So that's quite a lot to digest in one sentence, but I think that sort of is about yearning for the familiar in times of need or in limited time. That's kind of what I get from that statement, but feel free to correct me if my interpretation of that is wrong. So this is definitely an atmospheric black metal kind of an album. I'd say it's very somber and dreary in tone as well, almost to the point of being, sounding a bit like a doom metal record as well, actually. For me, it's sort of, it does linger on. A couple of the tracks linger on a little too long for my liking, and I do feel like the album could have done with some enhancements here and there and a little bit of polishing. In a way, I find the album as an analogy. It's like, to me, a bit like a new building or a new home, but without the paintwork being finished or the decorating being quite done yet. And that's sort of what I feel about this album. I do feel like it has a solid foundation and that there are good ideas here, but for me, they're not always built on enough, or that the tracks just, don't sort of, that where there are musical changes, they don't feel like they're kind of grabbing me enough as I'm listening to the album. I love atmospheric music and all different kinds of atmospheric metal, but for me, the atmosphere of this album wasn't always immersive enough to my taste to really bring me in and draw me into it. All that being said, the album definitely has its high points, and perhaps most notably for me, its opening track, Only Oblivion, which does have some really good musical changes, some great back and forth riffing in it as well, which I really enjoyed, and a good transitional moment as well, where it goes in some clean guitar playing and clean vocals. And overall, I thought this was actually a really strong starting point to the album. Next track, Approaching Death, was pretty good. It starts off with its evil lingering growl before going into some menacing guitar riffage. Another good track actually on the album. Now from then on was where I started to sort of enjoy the album a little less, with tracks like Condemned by Night and Cloistered. Condemned by Night in particular was a 10-minute track, which I didn't feel like it really kind of, it didn't draw me in enough with what it was doing. It just sort of meanders along, although it got a little bit better towards the end with some more sort of that death metal style riffage in it. Cloistered was an ambient, more drony kind of a track with some, I think it sort of had a bit of spoken word added in, a bit of synth, very, very atmospheric, that track. But that was a little more to my sort of kind of atmospheric, I guess, that song, very proggy, almost. Fifth track, Heartwood, I thought was getting the album sort of back more and getting me re-engaged in it a bit more with that particular song, which I thought was a little bit more to my taste, a little bit faster, a little bit more engaging. And then you finish the album with To Ride Upon the Plains, which had this really kind of interesting synth theme to begin with, which I really liked. But the album kind of, it did some varieties on that were interesting, but again, it didn't really kind of stamp its authority on me enough. And overall, I found the album just has that sort of effect a little bit. It felt like, as I say, some good ideas, pretty solid overall, but just didn't feel built on enough, or it didn't feel like it was really kind of, commanding is the word I think I'm looking for. The album just felt like it could have been a bit more commanding. In fact, the opening track, I would say, does have that feel to it. It does have a commanding kind of commanding feel. But a lot of the rest of the album didn't really have that so much for me and for my personal taste. But that being said, as I say, it's pretty cool. If you like atmospheric black metal, you might actually really quite dig this. I think, it's pretty decent as a listen. I wouldn't listen to tracks from this album in isolation. I would say the album's actually a bit better if you listen to it as a whole, and you sort of get that sort of you really immerse yourself into the style of the album and its sort of general tone. For me, therefore, I'm going to give this album a 6 out of 10. As it's a fairly respectable album. I think it would have certainly things that I think that could be worked on, and but overall pretty interesting stuff from Marsh of Swans. So what did you think of this album if you've listened to it? Otherwise, Do drop a like and sub as always to support the channel if you enjoy album review content or album content generally, as well as the sci-fi, fantasy and horror stuff, or a lot of horror on the channel recently. So yeah, otherwise from me, take care everybody, and until next time, it's bye for now.